us questions, share your inputs and thoughts. We're all for it. And thank you so much for thank you so much to the volunteers who have joined us from NSS and Jolly. Thank you so much for joining. All right. I guess we're all ready to get started. All right. Just give me a minute, Poorva, and we'll be starting with the questions. We'll jump right onto it. We have a lot to ask from you. Okay,
good, I'm ready.
Wonderful. Okay, so I hope we are broadcasting. If somebody can give me a heads up on that. I hope we're all audible. We're properly visible, and we can carry on with the conversation. A little heads up, please. All right. Thank you so much. Whoa, lots of heads up. All right, I love that. Okay, so with that, Poorva, we have the first question for you. The first question is definitely about promoting vegetarianism and, how animal welfare right now is looking in India. What's the status and how is it, looking right now? So the recent data of OECD FAO 2014, that showed that chicken consumption in India, it had grew at an annual rate of 5.9% between 1992 and 2013, which made India the fourth fastest growing market for chicken consumption. And, the numbers are definitely huge.
Yeah.
So India is still having the world's largest vegetarian population, and yet there is a declining trend there somehow. So how has PETA India's recent campaign, Go Vegan for the Planet, I was reading about it a while back. So how has that addressed this trend, and what are the specific strategies that maybe you've implemented to promote vegetarianism as a sustainable and compassionate choice?
So here's some good news. As you say, India has the largest share of people who are meat-free in the world. And by meat-free, I mean 39% of the population is vegetarian, and now 9% of the population is reported to be vegan. And the numbers are actually increasing. So in 2016, only 30% of Indians above the age of 15 were vegetarian. And in 2004, it was 25%. Were vegetarian. So the number of vegetarians and vegans is actually growing. And, this makes my heart sing, because chickens are perhaps the most abused animals in the world. So worldwide, some 202 million chickens are killed every single day. So let me put that into perspective. That is 140,000 chickens slaughtered every single minute. Every single minute, we slaughter 140,000 chickens in the world. And, these are animals who scientists now tell us are, just as smart as dogs and cats. They are wonderful mothers. They are clever. They, have the same feelings as the dogs and cats we share our home with, and they don't want to suffer and die. Yet what we do to chickens in India and around the world is so abhorrent. So chickens used for meat, they're called broiler chickens by the industry. And they are actually man-made creations because they have been selectively bred for such fast weight gain and muscle mass that they can be killed when they're just babies at only 6 weeks old for meat. Now, this abnormal growth puts such an extreme burden on their bodies that they can sometimes hardly even walk. Their legs bend and twist beneath their own weight. They're susceptible to heart failure. These animals are forced to live in severely overcrowded sheds in their own waste, which often causes their skin and eyes to burn. And then chickens used for eggs also live extremely dismal lives. They live in cages hardly larger than the size of their own bodies. Male chicks, because they can't lay eggs, are killed in the most gruesome ways in India. They're burned, they're drowned, they're crushed to death. And the abnormal, so a chicken's ancestor lays about 15 eggs per year, but today's egg laying chickens have been bred to be so abnormal that they lay about 300 eggs per year. Now, this is also so terribly hard on their bodies that they suffer osteoporosis, with some 30% of caged chickens suffering bone fractures. So that's the context. You know, these are the animals that we're trying to protect. And there's the universe is telling us that we really need to change our ways. And what I mean by that, for instance, is that, early on in the COVID pandemic, the UN Environment Program's Deputy Executive Director, her name is Elizabeth Mrema, she had said, the message we are getting is if we don't take care of nature, it will take care of us. Now, let's look at what's actually happening. There's a bird flu crisis going on in the world. For the first time ever, we've had in the United States dairy farm workers being infected with bird flu. Increasingly, mammals are being infected with bird flu, for example, mink on fur farms. The chicken factory farm environment in which chickens used for raised for meat or for eggs that they're reared, it is an environment that can have, because they're so crowded, extremely fast disease spread. And bird flu, so what scientists are now telling us is because increasingly mammals are getting this bird flu, it could mutate in a way that can increasingly infect humans with ease. So we thought COVID was bad. Bird flu has a 60% mortality rate in human beings. So what does PETA do with all of this? I mean, we raise awareness on all of these facts in a huge variety of ways. We bring out investigations that people can see on our website and our YouTube channel. And we also highlight how our cruelty to animals is actually affecting us in the form of bird flu, in the form of, for example, the climate catastrophe. The UN says that meat, egg, and dairy production is responsible for some nearly 1/5 of human-induced greenhouse gas emissions. And researchers have found that not eating meat and dairy can reduce an individual's carbon footprint from food by some up to 73%. So it benefits animals for us to be kind to animals, and it also benefits us. In fact, I've written a book called Survival at Stake, and I start the book with a quote from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And it says, "Whoever is kind to the creatures of God is kind to himself." And I think that is so very true. That is so very true. And we're seeing so many examples of that in the world today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your inputs on that. And definitely, what PETA has been doing definitely sounds very promising. And I hope that the picture improves for the future and, it's always better ahead. With that hope, I'm also curious about the whole issue of illegal trafficking of animals and the way they've been treated, like you were talking about chickens. And I think as Indians, most of the people here would also agree. We've seen chickens or cows and goats, they've been shoved into a truck which is very unhygienic, and they've been taken to places, and they're standing for hours and hours on end, or maybe they're at suffocated places. We have those videos of dogs also sometimes in reels, where they've been not treated in the right manner, in a very inhuman manner. So talking about this inhuman treatment and also the illegal trafficking, what are we doing on that front with regards to PETA?
So people are often really surprised to hear this, but one of the key contributors to illegal trafficking, especially of elephants in India, are their use in temples. So some around 32% or so of elephants in captivity in the country are actually in Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and they're used in temples. Many of them are chained in place in temples on their own. Now, most of these animals are kept illegally or have been transported to a different state without permission. They lack the correct paperwork, the correct ownership certificates. And what that means is that these elephants, the elephants that end up in temples, or at least the mothers of the elephants who end up in temples and so on, are very likely to have been captured in the wild. Because when you don't have a clear record of where these animals came from, it is very likely that somewhere along the chain there has been wild capture of these animals. Same kind of thing with elephants who are used for rides, such as at Amer Fort. There are numerous elephants there who lack the correct paperwork, correct ownership certificates. So one of the ways that we can tackle this is to never, ever support any place that uses captive elephants for entertainment. Don't hire elephants for your wedding. Don't support elephant rides. If your local temple keeps an elephant, talk to them about changing that. Because one of the technologies and one of the ways that we've worked with temples to overcome this is we've introduced the concept of mechanical elephants to numerous temples in South India. People love these mechanical elephants. First of all, it's modern, it's unique. People want to come see them. So we have worked with so far 3 different temples in South India where we've donated a life-size mechanical elephant to them. This mechanical elephant is a robot. So the elephant can do absolutely everything that a normal, like a live elephant does for these rituals, except this elephant never gets lonely. This elephant doesn't need to be fed. This elephant's not going to get upset. And that's very important because elephants, they do get upset. They do get upset by the cruelty that they suffer. And many of them end up going on to kill their mahouts or devotees or tourists or, people around them. So this is one of the ways that we are tackling illegal trafficking in the country.
That the idea of an artificial elephant, so to say, sounds very, very innovative for sure, and seems to be a great step in the right direction. So I'm reading all the comments and all the questions and all these wonderful inputs that have been pouring in, and I saw a question about are there any specific communities, since we were talking about certain states right now and we were talking about a certain culture, so to say, or a cultural belief. So, is there a certain community which, in terms of balancing vegetarianism or religion or tradition and animal welfare, which can serve as a great reference or a great example of, balancing this whole idea of belief and animal welfare? Anything that comes to your mind?
Every community and every religion can do that because all religions encourage kindness. All religions encourage compassion. And so there's, whether you're Muslim, Jain, Hindu, Buddhist, animal rights is for everyone. And there are some religions that have ahimsa, nonviolence as a tenet. But even other religions, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam, all of these religions, if you look into them, have messages of kindness to animals in them as well. For instance, there's a hadith which quotes the Prophet Muhammad, and it says, "A good deed done to an animal is as meritorious as a good deed done to a human being, while an act of cruelty to an animal is as bad as an act of cruelty to a human being." So,
Right.
whether you are whatever religion you're from, or even if you're of no religion, um,
Right.
we can all be kind to animals. I don't think it's a competition. I think what we have to do is take the good lessons from all of the religions and put them into practice.
Absolutely. That's a very, very beautiful thought. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Poorva. And I think that answers a few questions coming in the comments as well, about how religions can be linked, or, certain cultural thoughts can be aligned with
Yeah.
animal welfare and vegetarianism, of course. So, since we were talking about religions, so I want to go ahead and address the halal meat controversy and,
Hmm.
its legislative impact, the way it is shaped up. So, the
Yeah.
issue of halal slaughter has also been a point of contention for a
Hmm.
pretty long time in this country. And, the way that the Animal Welfare Board issued an advisory against, and then following PETA India's appeal. So, how has PETA worked to raise awareness against, any such practices that have been going on?
So, when some halal and Jhatka discussions were going on in Karnataka, PETA India actually placed a billboard that read, "Halal and Jhatka meat kill animals and the planet, go vegan." Because animals neither want their throats slit, nor do they want to be decapitated. And even when animals are stunned prior to slaughter, which is required by law in India, but pretty
Right.
much never happens. And that's, I think, the letter you're talking about is, we do encourage at least for the laws to be adhered to. But even stunning is often incorrectly done. And all of these animals face enormous cruelties, including stressful transport, rough handling, being caged or chained in place, and so on in the lead up to slaughter.
Right.
Slaughter is just one aspect of the cruelty that these animals face. So, at the time that those discussions were happening, PETA India actually sent a letter to the then Karnataka chief minister, encouraging him to focus instead on advocating for vegan food, to save animals, to protect human health and the planet. And this is not a strange recommendation because, for example, the New Zealand government is recommending for its citizens to consume more vegan food. China has committed to reducing its meat consumption by 50%. Germany's former environment minister banned meat from meetings and events. And Denmark, Germany, Sweden, and some other countries are actually discussing levying a higher tax on meat.
Right.
And that's because of the huge environmental impact that meat production has on the planet.
Right.
That we do have to eat differently. Meat, egg, and dairy production is a huge contributor to the greenhouse gases that cause
Absolutely.
climate change. And so it is, this affects all of us. And so there are numerous countries and numerous governments that are actually actively encouraging their citizens to eat more plant foods. There's a study that said if all of us, went vegan, then we could save up to 8 million human lives by 2050 and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2/3. So it's very important.
Absolutely. And again, 8 million is a big number. So,
Yeah.
that itself shows the impact, right? So, when we talk about, in one side, there is religious practices, certain practices that have been going on, and then comes legislative developments. Then comes the way, organizations like PETA engage and balance both of those aspects. So, if you could just provide us a little more insight as to how you balance that dynamic and how you go ahead and, raise awareness and inculcate that kind of spirit that, all of these things can be wonderfully put together somehow.
Well, one of the things that people often raise is this concept of personal choice. And, I always say personal choice is only when there's no victim in the matter.
Right.
We don't talk about personal choice when it comes to, say, child abuse. We don't say it's my personal choice to abuse a child. So it's neither should be considered our personal choice to be cruel to an animal. We do have other options for what we can eat, what we can wear, how we choose to entertain ourselves, and how we conduct research and all of it. Everything that
Right.
we do to animals right now as a society, cruelly, we don't need to do. But the other thing that we always point out is India is revered the world over for its cultural and religious importance
Right.
to animals. So we just simply remind people that it's not only part of our culture to be kind to animals, but it's also there in our constitution.
Absolutely.
Article 51 AG requires all Indian citizens to be kind to animals. And so and the entire world has actually learned kindness to animals from India. In fact, there's some information that indicates that a Himalayan tribe, the Brokpa of Ladakh, they're reported to have been vegan 5,000 years ago. So the original vegans are probably Indian. And Indian vegetarianism, that has been having an influence on Western dairy practices since as far back as the 4th century BCE. So when we're talking about tradition, India's tradition is one of kindness to animals.
Absolutely, and that again answers some of the questions that have been pouring in. So great that we could align our interaction with the questions that have been coming in. So that's definitely there. I read another question around since we're talking about the interplay of religion, and then there comes law, and then there comes all the kind of initiatives that organizations take or certain communities take. So is there a difference in how animal welfare or this whole idea of showing kindness and empathy to animals, the way that animals are treated? So, is there a difference in that mindset, in rural and urban areas? Is there any difference?
I think there's, people who are cruel in both rural and urban settings, and I
True.
think there's people who are kind in both rural and urban settings. I
Right.
think the difference probably is that in urban settings we tend to hide the cruelty. If we look at urban settings, you have animals being killed behind high walls of slaughterhouses. You're not allowed to go into a slaughterhouse just like that. You can go onto an apple farm, though.
Right.
But, slaughterhouses, these industries, the meat industry, the leather industry, they take great care to try to hide what's happening to animals behind these big, heavy, heavy walls. So I
Right.
think that is one thing that, in an urban environment, maybe um, maybe people should be more encouraged to look at PETA India's investigations, because what we do is we go behind the walls of those slaughterhouses. We
Right.
go and we get inside of animal laboratories. We go to the circuses and we bring out information about what's really happening to these animals
Right.
to the public, both urban and rural.
Right.
So PETA has projects both in urban and rural environments. One of the things that we're right now doing in the rural setup is we are working to transition people who are reliant on the use of animals for work to other means. For instance, people who are using bulls or horses or donkeys and so on to do this grueling work to eco-friendly machinery instead. And through this project, we also rescue the animals who are replaced. And this has really helped the rural population, actually, because they are able to do a lot more work with the machinery than they can with the animals who sometimes get sick or break their bones and that sort of thing. But when it comes to dietary practices, probably arguably the urban population eats a lot more meat, eats a lot more dairy, buys a lot more leather.
So there's your answer.
Uses way more products that are tested on animals.
Right.
Are bigger consumers of all of these things that contribute to cruelty to animals. And let me talk a little bit about leather, because leather is so normalized when it's not a normal thing at all.
Right.
If you think about it, wearing the skin of somebody else on your feet, how bizarre is that? Leather is considered the most polluting material in fashion. And one of the reasons for that is that you have to use heavy chemicals to stop the skin from rotting and deteriorating off of your feet.
Right.
And so rural, urban, we all have room to do better. But
Absolutely.
I think the urban population especially should probably take a look at their buying practices. And if you log on to PETAindia.com, we have a lot of resources for people who want to buy more kind. We have something called PETA Approved Vegan to help people identify vegan fashions. We have something called Beauty Without Bunnies, which is to help people find cosmetics which are not tested on animals and that sort of thing. So I think I went a little convoluted there, but I think ultimately I got to the answer.
Definitely needed. No, that's very much needed. It shows when you passionately talk about something, and it shows when you genuinely, you have that intent to change somebody's mindset. So that definitely, reflects when you talk about animal welfare, and we're all for it, Poorva. So thank you so much again, and really enjoying. And definitely, this is going to be an insightful discussion. Whoever is a part, and I can see the comments pouring in. So I'm pretty sure that people are liking the discussion the way it's going forward. So, we were right now, as we were talking about leather, I guess the way cigarettes come with a certain disclaimer, or the way any other pollutant comes with a disclaimer that, okay, this needs, to be used in less quantities, or, you need to be a little reserved while using it. So probably, they should do that with leather as well, if possible.
Well, yeah, they should also do that with packages of meat or dairy or eggs. We were talking about chickens earlier. There's a doctors group in Washington, D.C. called Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Because I talk about chickens because some people think eating chickens is healthy. But what this doctors group says is that they warn cholesterol, carcinogens, pathogens, even feces found in chicken products increase the risk of heart disease, breast and prostate cancers, urinary tract infections, and foodborne illnesses, which is like, food poisoning and so on. And in the past, PETA had actually asked that meat, egg, and dairy packages come with a warning, the same as like cigarettes, because you get the same kind of diseases as what you get. You get certain cancers.
Absolutely.
You get heart disease. But with, meat, egg, and dairy production, it's also linked to diabetes, obesity, other types of ailments, which are very, very damaging to us. And the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, they're the world's largest organization of nutrition and dietetics practitioners, they say that vegans are at reduced risk of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, certain types of cancer, obesity. So it's well worth thinking about to be vegan, even just for your own personal health.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that should be a very, very solid argument. It should be seen as a very solid argument in support of veganism for sure. So, I was looking at a few other comments, and, earlier also, people asked that at times we look at veganism as a very expensive lifestyle, which
Mm-hmm.
which probably is not true. So, I would, love if you would share, some insights on that.
Well, I'm personally glad that it's not an expensive lifestyle. um, you know, people who say that kind of thing are usually referring to specialized, vegan foods
True.
like certain vegan meats that are on the market, or vegan milks, or vegan ice creams. And you can totally opt for all of that. But most Indian vegetarian food is vegan if you leave off the ghee and if you don't have paneer. And this concept of putting paneer in everything is relatively new anyway. But most vegetarian Indian food is vegan. So
True.
we're really talking about dal, sabzi, rice, chapati. These are vegan foods. So we're
Absolutely.
not talking about anything special. But even if you want to have the vegan meats, the vegan milks, the vegan cheeses, there's so many recipes on the internet for making them yourself. You don't have to buy those products. I mean, I'm all in favor of supporting the vegan companies and the vegan entrepreneurs, and I do think we will see a change in prices for those over time. As more and more people adopt eating vegan. But I would also say it's far more expensive to go to the hospital with heart disease, or with cancer, or having a stroke, or all of these diseases related to eating bad foods, meat, eggs, dairy, that sort of thing. So I think we have to look at the cost aspect in perspective.
Absolutely, absolutely. That sounds lovely, and that sounds very, very promising for sure. So, that brings us to how public perceptions and, certain social dilemmas play out, and, how they shape the mindset of people. And people are sometimes convinced to believe into, certain truths which are not really facts in the nature of their being. So, that gets me to the way that certain advocacy efforts have played out in the recent times. Talk about the ban on the registration of elephants for performance in circuses and certain events, the way that they are treated at these events, at such ceremonies. So, and you were earlier talking about this collaboration that you had with certain South Indian temples. So, if you could add a little more about how these collaborations have been going forth, and how these advocacy efforts have been playing out and how they've been panning out so far.
So PETA collaborates with everybody from members of government, government committees, to corporations. We work with educators. We work with a variety of stakeholders to encourage kindness to animals. For instance, let me just, one of the ways that we work with educators is we have a talking elephant called Ellie, who goes to schools and she talks to children about being kind to animals. And so that's one way that we're working with the education system. We have an education program called Compassionate Citizen, which is encouraging kindness to animals and children. So that's one way we work with them there. We work with the government to help them examine requirements for animal experimentation. We've changed so many
Mm-hmm.
regulatory requirements
Right.
that at one point they were requiring animal experimentation that we have managed to remove those requirements. For instance, cosmetic testing.
Uh-huh.
It has been, you can no longer test cosmetics or their ingredients on animals in India. You can no longer test household products like cleaners, detergents, and so on animals in India. And this came about by so we have scientists on staff. We have 3 scientists on staff, and what they do is they work to help educate scientists in government on and in industry what can be done instead of the use of animals, what can be done instead of poisoning a rabbit or shoving some chemical down a rabbit's throat, that sort of thing. We work with corporations. We recently worked with Metro Brands
Mm-hmm.
to encourage them to launch their first line of vegan shoes. Uh, we have encouraged Book My Show to stop selling tickets to animal circuses. We've encouraged OLX and Quicker to stop facilitating animal sales on their website. So there's many, many different ways that we
Great.
collaborate with
Mm-hmm.
different stakeholders. Some of them are religious in nature, for example, the temples. Others are not. So
Right.
we try to work with a huge variety of people wherever animals are used. We try to get
Right.
in there and have a conversation.
Absolutely, that sounds incredible. So, moving on, as we talk about raising awareness, the way that PETA is working, the way you're trying to engage people, it becomes very important that the youth also feels engaged with this particular issue, since it's so big, and its impact is very, very far fetched. So, youth engagement is definitely pivotal to all sorts of initiatives, all kinds of communities and organizations. So, the recent data also indicates a growing interest of animal rights. There's been an interest in animal rights. People are interested in animal rights, and somehow the youth is taking interest and showing inclination towards animal rights. So how is PETA leveraging that wave of interest and fascination, and how are you trying to maybe come up with programs or sessions or collaborations? How is that shaping up?
So we have an entire department dedicated to youth outreach. Apart from Ellie, our talking elephant who goes to schools, that's really more for small children. Where
I am
she's a
excited
robot.
to meet Ellie.
Yeah, she's a
Believe
robot.
me.
She's life-sized. She talks to kids about being kind to animals, but also we have another aspect of that department which reaches college-age students, um, targeting maybe like 13 to 24-year-olds, and we reach out to that community in a variety of ways. We try to be as creative as we can. So we just took our new program called Abducted to Comic-Con.
Uh-huh.
And this is a virtual reality experience
Uh-huh.
where the participant gets to see what it would feel like to be abducted by an alien and experimented on. And the idea is to help the students or the youngsters
Right.
who take part in this to consider the plight of monkeys, rats, rabbits, and other animals who are suffering in laboratories across the country. Who are caged, who are held down, who are poisoned, and so on in a laboratory setting. And to help them think about the fact that the world is moving on toward more modern, humane, human relevant methods of research. So that's one way. We also have another experience. It's called iChicken.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also a virtual reality experience where people can, it's like a video where they are a chicken. and they get to be picked up, taken
Right.
on a truck, taken to a slaughterhouse. So it's really all of these experiences are to help the participants consider what it is like for somebody else, whether that's a chicken, we have one for a cow, for the dairy industry, and so on. So when it comes to youth, we know we have to be interesting and creative, and so that's what we really aspire to do.
And I can certainly say that, it all sounds very, very innovative. The way that you're using technology, the way that you're using digital activism in favor of such initiatives. That's definitely very inspiring. And I can see our young participants in the comments, talking about, how animals are not for entertainment, and how, we should understand the difference of our, and draw that line between a certain cultural belief or a certain religious belief or a social dilemma, and how it can work in favor or it can work against animal welfare. And there are young participants talking about empathy and kindness in the comments, and that's really, really heartwarming. So on
Yeah, and
that
I
note,
think, oh,
yes,
and
yes, please
if
go ahead.
I may, one thing that is so very important and that's talked about on college campuses, as it should be, is the concept of consent. So if we apply the importance of getting consent to what we do to animals, animals do not consent to have their skin ripped off their bodies.
True.
Animals do not consent to be poisoned in a laboratory. Animals do not consent to have you chew on their leg, when you don't need to. Animals do not consent to any of these things that we do to them. So if ever you are confused as to whether something is right or wrong to do, just ask yourself,
True.
if I was that animal, would I give my consent? Has this
True.
animal given their consent to this? And usually the answer is no.
Right. Right, and that's the whole idea of understanding empathy and practicing empathy. When you can put yourself in the other person's shoes and think, what would this person or what would this entity go through if I let this happen, right?
Yes, absolutely. The same way we now recognize that racism, sexism, these are terrible isms. We don't want to be racist, we don't want to be sexist, but we shouldn't also want to be speciesist.
True.
And what speciesism is it's a bias, an unfair bias in favor of our own species at the detriment to others. And we do that simply because they're different from us. They come in different packages. They have feathers, or they have fins, or they have forelegs. Well, it's very similar to how men might be sexist against women because they
True.
are different, or how somebody might be discriminatory against someone else because of their sexual orientation, or simply because they're different in some way. Well, that's not fair to do to animals either.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that brings me to my next question as to things are not always so smooth to implement. There's always a certain kind of backlash. There's criticism. There's misconception. So how does PETA navigate through all these misconceptions, and when such organizations or such initiatives or communities, they are sometimes seen as culturally insensitive, which is not true, of course, but the way that it pans out at times, and we receive backlash for such stuff. So how does PETA navigate through that, and how do you again try and reinstill trust, in the face of such misconceptions? So
Yeah.
a few insights on that.
I can't think of anything more culturally insensitive than cruelty to animals.
True.
Because I don't know any religion or any culture that says, that cruelty to animals is a good thing to do. It's just not a thing. So people who tend to say that kind of thing or express that sort of criticism are usually doing it because they want to be cruel to an animal in some way.
True.
We in culture, tradition, all of these things are things that evolve. There was a time that it was sati, for example, was a part of our culture. There was a time that, sadly, it's still a problem, but discrimination by caste was even more a part of our
Absolutely.
culture.
Indeed.
You know, child labor, you know, all of these things. As we learn, we have to grow. We have to grow as a society. And today we know so much more about animals than we once did. You know, we know that they are intelligent. We know that they have the capacity to feel pain and to experience the same kinds of emotions that we see in the dogs and cats that we may know. You know, joy, sadness, you know, grief, jealousy, all of those things. And even this concept of intelligence. You know, we humans are such buffoons that we think, and so egotistical, that we think of ourselves, we are self-appointed most intelligent beings on the planet. We
Absolutely.
only say that we are.
And have to
But
sadly agree to that.
But in reality, every species is as intelligent and or has the capabilities that they need to survive in their environment. So, you know, a gibbon doesn't need to know how to file taxes, but a gibbon surely needs to know which branches of the trees are the strongest when they swing through the jungle. You know, a dolphin doesn't need to know, you know, how to get to the grocery store or something like that. A dolphin lives in a dolphin world, and a dolphin is as intelligent as is required for their environment. And there's so many things that animals can do that humans cannot. So if we were, for example, measured by what a bird can do, navigate flight, navigate huge distances, we have to have our maps on our phone just to go down the
Absolutely.
street.
Right.
You know, who is smarter in that scenario? So
Right.
it's not fair to compare the intelligences of different species on the measure of only human intelligence, because
True.
humans have the intelligence that we need to live in a human world. They have the intelligences that they need to live in their jungle or ocean homes.
Absolutely, and that reminds me of countless number of incidents where dogs and elephants, have been seen to sense natural calamities like earthquakes and floods, and there have been countless such incidents where humans have taken maybe their time to identify a certain situation, a certain crisis, a certain natural calamity, and animals have responded, quicker than humans, and they have identified those situations better. So definitely, I.
Yeah, that absolutely. I mean, there's, you know, there's so many almost superstar kind of abilities that many
Absolutely.
animals have that humans do not. You know, right the way from smell to speed to navigation to you know, all sorts of things. So
Right.
um, we just have to open our eyes to really see. And a lot of people don't. A lot of people want their eyes to be closed because they want to eat animals, or they want to wear animals, or they want to experiment on animals, or abuse animals in a circus. And it's
Right.
much easier on our conscience to tell ourselves that, well, animals are stupid. Animals don't feel pain, when that's not true at all. You know, we're
Right.
only telling ourselves those lies to make ourselves feel better, when the truth
Absolutely.
of the matter, that's not the case at all. If we give animals credit where credit is due, it becomes our moral responsibility to react to those facts. If we accept that
Absolutely.
animals are intelligent, that animals can feel pain, that they have the capacity to suffer and feel emotion, what are we going to do about it?
Right. And good that you talked about what are we going to do about it, and all those closed eyes and convoluted aspirations that people have, or probably some hidden selfishness, or I don't know how to put it really. But that brings me to future aspirations, future strategies. How is PETA planning to bridge those beliefs even better, instill more trust, instill more conviction, maybe align a little bit more intent and fascination and interest towards animal welfare. So, what are the upcoming challenges? How does PETA envision those, and how are you catering to the future strategies and vision?
So, PETA is constantly looking for new ways of helping animals. And so we're always trying to be on top of technologies or, new ways that human beings are engaging with each other and that sort of thing. So one of the things that we're now doing is we're trying to figure out how we can use AI to help animals. I'm sure there's, this is an area that's going to evolve as we ourselves also learn more about AI and what it can do, and as
Right.
AI itself also evolves. But our colleagues at PETA in the US, they recently created a series of AI generated ads or images, which they were titled "You Make Me Sick," and it was about it was about pugs. So pugs are very, very commonly sold in India as dogs. A lot of people have pugs at home, but what a lot of people don't know is that sorry, it seems that we're frozen.
There seems to be a slight.
Hi, there you are. Yes.
Yes, there seems to
Can
be
you
a.
hear me?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. There was a lag, probably.
Yeah.
Yes. I am so sorry.
So
Yes, yes. Please go ahead. I'm so sorry. Yes.
okay. So I was saying that, our friends at PETA US have created AI generated images called You Make Me Sick, which is about pugs. So pugs are very commonly sold dog breed in India because of the Vodafone commercials and all the rest of it. But what people don't know is that them and other flat-faced breeds, they have been deliberately bred by humans to look that way, because it's arbitrarily thought
Right.
to be cute. But when you see a pug, they seem like they can't breathe because they genuinely cannot breathe. Their faces, they have been bred in such a way that their faces have been smushed in. So these poor animals have a lot of breathing difficulties. They have a lot of skin ailments. They often need surgery. Sometimes their eyes literally bulge out of their faces. So PETA has a campaign discouraging people, or educating people about this, and discouraging people from buying pugs. So that's one AI generated series of kind of ad campaigns that PETA did. And for example, the other things I talked about for PETA Youth, where we're using those virtual reality experiences to help people consider what animals go through. We're always trying to do those kinds of things, keeping our eye out for what we can do, even in the realm of science. So PETA India scientists are part of something called PETA International Science Consortium. Some of the ways that that science consortium has used technology to help animals is they have, for example, funded to help create a first of its kind 3D model that can study the effects of chemicals and other substances on the deepest part of the human lung without animal experimentation. And so, together with other non animal tests, this model has the potential to help replace roughly the use of 1 million animals a year in tests in which they are otherwise forced to inhale toxic substances before they're killed. So, similarly, the Science Consortium funded a project that led to the creation of a fully human derived antibodies capable of blocking the toxin that causes diphtheria. So, usually this type of vaccine is created with through the use of animals. So, there's lots of different ways that PETA tries to stay on top of technology to help animals. There's lots of even in the realm of food science, nowadays the vegan meats or the vegan cheeses and so on that you get are taste so much like the real thing that
Absolutely.
it's really become a very useful tool to help people transition away from meat, egg, and dairy consumption. There's also nowadays leather being made from plants, leather being made from agricultural waste like mango waste, pineapple waste, coconuts, and so on. So, what PETA is going to do and how we're going to use what we're going to do next, I think so much of it depends on what we as a society invent, as a way to engage with each other and that sort of thing, because that is ever evolving and rapidly evolving in
Absolutely.
our world today.
So I must say, truly glad and grateful that I got to, share inputs, probably ask these questions, address these concerns, and definitely the insights that you have shared, the kind of initiatives that PETA is developing, designing, and implementing so well. I am sure that's going to help promote a culture of compassion and respect towards animals all over the world, and I'm sure it's going to get the picture is going to get bigger and brighter as time passes. And thank you so much. I've truly enjoyed this conversation with you, Poorva, and I can see
Me
the
too.
same energy reflecting in the comments. And I'm sure this is going to be an insightful discussion as to whoever accesses this conversation, whenever and howsoever. Thank you so much for your time, Poorva.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your insights, and they were wonderful. They were absolutely wonderful. And now we come to the most exciting part of this session. So it's time to show the leaderboard as to who have been the top three people who have had the maximum engagement throughout the session. Let's have the leaderboard here. And there we go. So we have Muskan, we have Sanvi, and we have on the third position Yakshata. So congratulations to all the three winners. And I hope that you keep interacting the way you did today. And I hope that this session can be useful, can be informative, and may probably convince people to inculcating a culture of having more compassion and respect towards animal welfare. Thank you so much. Thank you so very much, Poorva. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did.
I did. Thank you again for having me. This was great.
Thank you so much, and definitely you've made my Saturday so much better. Always up for such conversations and discussions.
Likewise. Likewise.
Thank you so much, Poorva. Thank you again. Thank you on the behalf of Pratha and Jio Events. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with this, we come to an end of our session. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, and I hope that this proves to be informative and insightful. Thank you so very much, everyone, and wishing you a great evening ahead. Thank you.